So I want to talk about why World Tier 4 was such an important milestone to finish as soon as possible, or rather acquire as soon as possible, because it insanely boosted my progression. Now the same logic applies to World Tier 3, which I had a video on earlier, and the same logic applies to World Tier 4. Now, you can see I'm level 69, so I was able to beat the capstone dungeon earlier than the recommended level of 70. And I actually beat it at level 60, so 10 levels earlier. If you're hardcore, I would highly not recommend this because I did die a couple times. But in World Tier 4, you might notice a few things. Now, we've talked a little bit about this, but in World Tier 4 and 3, we get a new classification of items. In Tier 3, it is sacred. In Tier 4, it is ancestral. Now, not only are we to get that new gear, we're also to get a bunch of other things. We, in World Tier 3, unlock Nightmare Dungeons, Helltide Zones, and Champion Monsters, which also applies to World Tier 4. We also get 100% increased experience, and it's more difficult in World Tier 3. And in World Tier 4, we get 200% increased experience, and they're even more difficult. Now, what's important about this is A, the experience, and B, the actual loot that you're acquiring. When you unlock sacred items are just items that are superior quality. What I mean by this is when you're killing a monster, you're going to drop the same magic items, rare items, legendary items, but they're just going to have a chance to be sacred, which is basically just better stats. And the same thing applies to World Tier 4 and ancestral items. Now the kicker is these items, if you're assuming you're level 70, but in fact, I actually was able to equip items in World Tier 4 at level 60, so it is earlier than it suggests. You're able to equip level 100 gear at level 60 in World Tier 4, and potentially level 70 gear at level 50 in World Tier 3, because there is no level requirement after you've accessed that World Tier difficulty. Again, assuming you've accessed it at the recommended level, right? If you access it way before like level 30, then you can't equip those level 70 pieces of gear because they're generally going to be level scaled to 50 in terms of the requirement. So the key reason why we're pushing these is because if you can unlock these difficulties at all, and you can get a couple of pieces of sacred gear or ancestral gear, they're going to massively boost your attack power and armor. And they're actually very easy to acquire. And if you acquire those ancestral and sacred pieces, guess what? You can now potentially fight the open world areas and get massively increased experience, which will then help you potentially farm higher Nightmare Dungeons, or just enter into dungeons at level 70 in the World Tier 4, so you have a much easier time. Now, if I were to go into the game here, I just want to showcase how easy it is to get ancestral weapons and armor, because it is everywhere. It is extremely easy to acquire it. And yes, you may not get the right loot or items that you want, but at least getting the stats here is worth it. So if I were to go ahead and teleport over to one of my favorite areas, Yelazna, we were to go ahead and kill some ghouls in the area, you'll quickly see how fast we're able to get the ancestral pieces. And my recommendation is, even if a piece doesn't have the ideal stats, oftentimes they have a really massive, base increase in armor or attack power. It's generally worth it. And I would just recommend swapping over legendary aspects to those pieces, and make sure you're not extracting way earlier than you might expect, because you're going to be replacing gear all the way up until about level 70 when you unlock World Tier 4, because now I have a much lower amount of gear replaced, simply for the fact that I have way higher level gear because of World Tier 4. And you can see I'm killing a bunch of common mobs, which is pretty simple, right? Nothing too crazy here. We haven't dropped a piece of armor yet, but once we do, you'll be able to see that it's very common. And of course, we're able to drop sacred items in the World Tier 4 as well. So ancestrals are a little bit more rare than the sacred pieces, but they're still very common. So if we continue to kill here, maybe I'll find an elite. If we enter a dungeon or anything, we'll be able to easily find a lot of our gear pieces here. But maybe we'll find one from an open world mob here. There we go. So after killing like 4 groups of monsters, guess what? We got an ancestral bow. And immediately, my bow still needs to be replaced here. But with better stats here, because it's not my main weapon, right? So this is just like a side piece, so I haven't replaced it yet. But any main armor or main weapon pieces, you immediately want to go ahead and replace. Now, the one on the left here, you'll see it is requiring level 37, and I actually acquired this on World Tier 3 because it is a decent piece and ended up having the stats that I wanted. Now you see that it says requires level 69, but that's just because I am level 69. If you do this at level 60, I was able to equip some ancestral pieces of gear, and the ancestral gear is almost always going to be better than the ones you already had on. And I literally just killed 5 packs of white monsters, common monsters, and I was able to drop an ancestral piece. If you're able to kill elites, if you're able to do dungeons, dropping ancestral legendaries, ancestral rare items is going to be raining all over the place. You do not have to worry about finding loot that you kind of need or want in World Tier 4. And this is very, very crucial because, again, these stat increases are far superior than what you're going to acquire in World Tier 3, generally speaking. Of course, you can get something that's worse, but most often than not, you're going to get something that's way better, which is why you want to get to World Tier 3 as soon as possible, and then corresponding get to World Tier 4 as soon as possible, because you're going to unlock gear that is way, way better at a base level than your gear you already have on. Hopefully this helps, guys. Again, I've spent hundreds, at this point, hundreds of hours in Diablo 4, and about 100 hours in this review build, and I've been trying to learn as much as possible. So if you want to hear more and you're interested in some tips, or if this video just helped you, consider dropping a sub and a like on the video, and I'll see you all for more Diablo 4 content.